So, moment of truth to see if the tire's not going to hit the frame. That's some decent clearance. And then picking this thing up. It's a little close, but definitely enough space in between it. Now, I kind of want to start working on getting the chains on here so we can kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. So let's start working on the chains that go from the jack shaft to the rear tires, which is simply just we need to machine some sprockets and hubs and weld them together and slide them on here and machine some keyways. But for the middle one, that one that goes from the jack shaft to the front spool, it's going to be kind of similar, but we have to make it unlockable. Now, there's really no good way of putting a dial indicator on this sprocket to get it running perfectly true. So the easiest way that I've found to do this is by taking a piece of round stock with a tapered end on one side. That tapered end fits in the hole of the sprocket. This end fits in your tailstock. And that way you can indicate off of this to get this sprocket running perfectly true and to get rid of the run out. Is that right? No, that's not right. So if this is the high side, I'm doing this backwards. What am I doing? This is the high side, so this goes lower. Now, normally I just use a boring bar to bore the hole out to whatever size we need, but because we have to bore this out to 2 inches, it'd be a little faster if we can just use an annular cutter to bore this out. But this isn't hardened steel, but it's not soft either, and a boring bar does kind of have a hard time with it, so I'm not sure if an annular cutter is going to be able to cut this without destroying this destroying this thing, so I don't know. Let's just try it, and worst case, if it ends up ruining this annular cutter, these were only like 30 bucks each. Alright, hopefully this works. Let's try it a little bit slower. Okay, that didn't do anything, and the annular cutter looks fine. It's still sharp, but yeah, I don't think it's gonna cut through this. I'm actually curious if this will work. Let's try this. Now, we still need to broach the keyways, all 4 keyways in these, but actually I just bought on Amazon an air-over hydraulic bottle jack for that press that I have. That's gonna make it a lot faster and a lot easier to broach the keyways in these. So let's wait for that thing to get here to broach the keyways. That thing should get here sometime next week. Now, we need to make the other sprocket that goes in the center of this for the chain that goes from the jack shaft up to the front spool for the 4-wheel drive. Now, it's going to be kind of similar to this, except we need to make it to where we can unlock it from the jack shaft, so therefore it can free spin in 2-wheel drive. Now, essentially, what we're building is half of one of my old 2-speed transmissions. This is going to allow us to engage that center chain for 4-wheel drive and disengage it for 2-wheel drive, so therefore that center chain isn't spinning in 2-wheel drive. Now, we had to use bearings instead of bushings, so therefore it can handle the high RPM and not have any issues. Also, I had to use 17-tooth sprockets, so therefore it's large enough, so therefore it can fit on the outer diameter of the bearings and still have a little bit of room for the metal to hold the bearings in place. Normally I try to use like a 14 or a 15-tooth sprocket, but we're using 17-tooth just to get this to work. Now, we need to cut out the plates on here, and normally this would kind of take me a really long time to cut these plates out. You know, cutting out the outer diameter, inner diameter, machining all these features and everything, but now that we have Fusion 360 and the ArcDroid plasma cutter, it should be way faster and way easier to cut this stuff out. So actually, the plates that we need to cut them really accurately, and I keep having issues of, as we're cutting, the dross or slag of cutting keeps grabbing onto the table, and as it cools, it shrinks, and it keeps moving the part around as it's cutting, and which is not good, and I tried fixing it by clamping the piece of metal to the table, which does help, but I can still kind of see it move around slightly, and with this part, it needs to be really accurate. So I'm kind of thinking, what if we just cut off 3 of these pieces of metal, so therefore we're cutting over empty air, and it's not, the dross isn't grabbing onto the table. It is going to have an issue of the parts is going to try and fall through the table as soon as it's done cutting, but I don't think that's a big issue. I don't know. I kind of want to do it and see if it's a little bit more accurate and it works a little bit better. Worst case, we can always weld these back on later if it doesn't work. It seems like I do most of my cutting right here, so let's just cut these 3. I forgot to ground the table. Let's try that again. So I wish I thought of this years ago because, you know, I always have to, in some cases, file down the inside diameter of something like this, and you can't use a grinder. You know, you can use a file, but that takes kind of a long time. Or you could go to Harbor Freight, spend I think like $60 on a Bauer brushless router, and I think I bought these metal burrs. I think that's what these are called, metal burrs, on Amazon. They were not that expensive, like 15 bucks I think for a pack of 8 or something. It eats away at metal really fast. It's a lot easier than taking a file to this, and it's a little bit more accurate because you know this is a perfect 90 degrees to this. So So, we got one half of this assembly almost finished. We just need to weld this thing together, but before we do that, let's start working on the other half, and then we can weld them both together at the same time. This kind of feels like it's not hardened steel, but it's not soft either. It's a little, you can tell the lathe is kind of working pretty hard to take a little bit of material off. So I don't know, this kind of feels like not hardened, but let me find some other metal that's a little bit easier to machine. So, that air over hydraulic bottle jack that I ordered to help us broach the keyways on these, it hasn't gotten here yet, but we don't really need the keyways on this stuff. We more just need this just to mock up the chain and everything. So let's weld this together and put it on the frame, and we'll do the keyways some other time. Yeah, I think this thing's shrunk. Now the bearings won't fit. Yeah, I had to put this back in the lathe and take off like 5 thou because it definitely shrunk after I welded it. So I'm a little surprised. I only had to put 2 chains together to reach this distance. I thought I would have to put like 3 of them together, but I miscalculated that, which is a good thing. Also, I left it really loose because I'm going to do some type of chain tensioners. Up here we got to do a chain tensioner because none of these are adjustable back and forth. Also, I am considering doing some type of really long chain slide along, you know, the top and bottom chain, so therefore they're not slapping, and especially they're not slapping each other. As well as, obviously, I'm going to put a tunnel along here, so therefore our legs can't accidentally get caught in this. So this is the key for this whole chain drive setup, so therefore we can disengage this center chain for two-wheel drive. So therefore in two-wheel drive we don't have this spinning, we don't have the front spool spinning and creating unnecessary drag on this setup. So basically it is pretty much very similar to one of my two-speed transmissions. This has bearings on it, so therefore it can spin freely on the jack shaft. This is going to have 4 keyways on here, pretty much similar to this, except this one can slide back and forth and engage and disengage with this. In two-wheel drive, we can unlock the hubs and then slide this over. This will unlock with this, so therefore this center chain's not spinning, and then when we want to four-wheel drive, we lock the front hubs, slide this over, this will engage with this, this will start spinning this chain, front spool and everything, and front hubs will be locked, so therefore it'll spin the front tires. So, and then I'll make it to where we can slide this thing back and forth just by moving a lever somewhere on the frame. Now, let me take a moment to answer some questions you guys have been asking. One question that I keep seeing a lot of is, why do I keep using chain drives? Why don't I use CV axles, drive shafts, differentials? Why don't I use car engines? Why do I keep using motorcycle engines? For me, this is what I have the most fun doing. Building something that really hasn't been done before and having the challenge of making it work. Plus, this allows me to build and machine most of the drive components from scratch versus just going to a car junkyard and buying differentials and buying CV axles and transfer cases and kind of just assembling it. This allows me to build most of this thing, which I have the most fun doing. Because I keep seeing comments, not a lot, but some comments of some of you guys think that this isn't strong enough, that this isn't going to work, that as soon as I go around the corner, the chains are going to snap because they're binding up. And I remember seeing a lot of comments like that when I was building the CBR 1000 project. Not a lot, but some of you guys thought that that project wasn't going to work, the chains were going to snap. It wasn't because it doesn't have a differential, it's just not going to work, and I've never had an issue with that suspension. I've never snapped a chain on that project, I've never had any issues with anything bending or breaking, and that suspension works amazing, and I've been beating the crap out of it for 2 years with no issues. That is why I want to take the same setup and take it to the next level. That's why I want to build chain-driven, four-wheel drive with big tires, bigger engine, and I want to see if I can make this work. So, worst case, if we do end up snapping a chain, we just buy a chain with a higher tensile strength. They do make those, they're just more expensive. And I highly doubt we're gonna snap one of these chains. It would take a lot of force to snap one of these things. These are 530 O-ring chains. So for me right now, this is what I have the most fun doing, is challenging myself, making a setup like this work, and building all the different drive components to make it work. So, but I'm not saying that I want to stick with this forever. I would like to in the future start working on car engines, different, CV axles, drive shafts, but truck axles, transfer cases, that kind of stuff, and mainly car engines, because I would like to eventually get away from motorcycle engines. It's just performance car engines, those are not cheap, and performance motorcycle engines are cheap. You can pick one of these things up for like $2 or $3 grand. If you wanted a performance car engine, like either a V6 or a V8, it's like double or triple what I paid for that thing. So, anyway, next video is we get to continue working on the tail section. We gotta widen it. We gotta put the secondary transmission installed, get the engine installed, and also start working on just more of the frame and everything. I'm still not sure if I want to add doors to this thing. It would be kind of cool to add doors, but it's going to be a lot easier to build this thing without doors, and it doesn't need doors, but it would be nice to have doors. It would also be kind of cool for the challenge, challenging myself to make doors and make it work and everything. So I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided about that yet, but anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.